What if I told you that you could disappear into the vast Australian nowhere, build a life on your own terms, dodge the suffocating grip of city bureaucracy, and do it all without needing a passport, a visa, or an explanation to your therapist about why you're abandoning civilization? Sounds like a fever dream induced by too many Tim Tams and a Bunnings sausage sizzle existential crisis, doesn't it? Well, mate, it's real. I'm Mr. Austral, and these places exist. Proper Australian territories and forgotten towns where the kangaroos outnumber the council inspectors. The nearest traffic light is a 3-hour drive, and your biggest worry is whether the servo stocks your favourite meat pie flavour. Support the channel or enjoy a life of council regulations where changing a tap requires permission. Joking, subscribe. Number 5. Cocos Keeling Islands, the Indian Ocean's best kept secret, where time forgot to show up. We're starting strong with the Cocos Keeling Islands, a place so remote that even Google Maps had to think twice before adding it. This is where you go when you want to fall off the grid entirely, live somewhere absolutely stunning, and confuse every single person who asks where you moved to. The Cocos what now? Yes, it's Australian? Barely. But legally, absolutely. The Cocos Keeling Islands are an Australian external territory sitting in the Indian Ocean, roughly halfway between Australia and Sri Lanka, which means you're not close to anything except water, more water, and the occasional confused sea turtle, wondering why humans bother with anything beyond floating and eating jellyfish. We're talking about 27 coral islands forming 2 atolls, and only 2 of those islands are actually inhabited: Home Island and West Island. The rest are just there, vibing, enjoying their existence without humans mucking it up. Here's where it gets beautifully weird. The population is around 600 people. 600. That's not a suburb, that's barely a decent wedding guest list. And about 70% of those people are Cocos Malays, descendants of workers brought over in the 1800s to harvest coconuts. The culture here is a fascinating blend of Malay traditions, Australian bureaucracy, and that unique island mentality where urgency is a foreign concept and she'll be right is an actual governance philosophy. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like paradise, you're half right. The beaches here are so ridiculously perfect, they look photoshopped. Crystal clear turquoise water, white sand that squeaks when you walk on it, and coral reefs teeming with fish that haven't learned to fear humans yet, because, honestly, there aren't enough humans here to be a statistically significant threat. You can snorkel, dive, kitesurf, or just sit on the beach contemplating why you ever thought owning a car and a mortgage was a good idea. But let's talk practicality, because paradise always comes with a catch. Everything has to be shipped in. Everything. That means your groceries cost more than your dignity. And if you have specific dietary requirements beyond food, you're going to learn the art of adaptability real fast. The supply ship comes every few weeks, and if it's delayed because of weather or because the captain decided to take a detour to check out some particularly nice-looking clouds, well, you're eating whatever's left in the pantry and calling it a character-building exercise. Internet exists. Technically, it's satellite-based, which means it works until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, you can't just call tech support and demand satisfaction. You accept it. You go outside. You remember what the sky looks like without a screen in front of it. If your entire livelihood depends on stable, high-speed internet, the Cocos Islands will either cure you of that dependency or drive you completely mad, possibly both. Employment opportunities are limited to government jobs, tourism, fishing, and whatever creative endeavor you can conjure up that doesn't require a steady supply chain or more than 500 potential customers. This isn't the place you move to climb the corporate ladder. This is the place you move to when you've realized the corporate ladder was actually a treadmill leading nowhere, and you'd rather catch fish and watch sunsets than attend another quarterly review meeting. Housing is sparse but affordable compared to mainland Australian cities, which is like saying a crocodile is friendlier than a saltwater crocodile. You're not getting a bargain, but you're also not paying $2 million for for a one-bedroom apartment in Sydney where your balcony view is your neighbour's laundry. Rent can be around $500 to $800 a month for something decent, and if you're lucky enough to buy land, well, you're part of an extremely exclusive club of people who own property on islands most Australians couldn't locate on a map with 3 tries, and a helpful dolphin pointing the way. The lifestyle here is simple, brutally, beautifully simple. There's one school, one medical clinic, one general store that's more of a we've got what we've got and what we don't have, you don't need situation. The pace of life isn't just slow, it's geologically inactive. Things happen when they happen. Appointments are suggestions. If you're the type of person who hyperventilates when someone's 5 minutes late, the Cocos Islands will either heal you or break you. And honestly, it's a 50-50 shot which way that goes. The community is tight-knit in that way that only tiny isolated populations can be. Everyone knows everyone. Your business is everyone's business, but in a caring way, not a judgmental neighborhood watch way. If you need help, someone will help. If you're being an idiot, someone will tell you. It's honest, it's direct, and it's refreshing in a world where everyone hides behind passive-aggressive emoji responses. Weather-wise, it's tropical. Hot, humid, and prone to the occasional cyclone, because apparently, paradise needed a final boss level. But outside of cyclone season, it's warm year-round, which means you can forget what winter feels like and never have to own a proper jacket again. Your wardrobe becomes thongs, shorts, and that one shirt you wear when you need to look fancy, which in this context means it doesn't have visible stains. You're not moving to the Cocos Keeling Islands for convenience. You're moving here to escape every notification, expectation, and soul-crushing routine that modern life convinced you was normal. You're moving here because you want to wake up to the sound of waves instead of traffic, measure time in tides instead of spreadsheets, and remember what it feels like to be genuinely, quietly, peacefully free. Just don't expect Amazon Prime. Seriously, don't. Number 4, Christmas Island, the rock in the middle of nowhere, with crabs, caves, and complete isolation. At number 4, we've got Christmas Island. And before you ask, no, it's not particularly Christmassy unless you count the millions of red crabs that migrate across the island every year like a festive apocalypse. This place is an Australian external territory sitting in the Indian Ocean, closer to Indonesia than to Australia, which means it's geographically confused but legally Australian. And that's all that matters if you want to live here without dealing with visas or explaining yourself to immigration officers with stamps and skepticism. Christmas Island is tiny, only 135 square kilometers, but it punches way above its weight in terms of natural beauty and sheer weirdness. 2/3 of the island is national park, which means dense jungle, limestone caves, dramatic cliffs, and beaches that look like someone designed them specifically to make you question every life choice that led you to living in a landlocked suburb eating microwaved leftovers. The population hovers around 1,500 people, which is small enough that you'll recognize faces, but large enough that you're not obligated to attend every single community barbecue. The community is a mix of Chinese, Malay, and European descendants, which means the food is phenomenal. The cultural festivals are vibrant, and there's always someone who knows how to fix something, because collective knowledge is the only reason isolated communities survive without calling a tradie who charges $200 just to show up. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the crabs. Every year, around 50 million red crabs march from the jungle to the ocean to breed, and they cover absolutely everything: roads, gardens, your front porch, your sense of reality. The island shuts down parts of the road, people stay home, and the crabs do their thing because this is their island. We're just renting space. If you can't handle the idea of crustaceans owning the place for a few weeks a year, Christmas Island is not for you. If you think it's the coolest thing you've ever heard, welcome home. Living here is like living inside a nature documentary, except you're the one making toast while a jungle surrounds your house and seabirds scream like they've got strong opinions about your toast technique. The island has stunning beaches, world-class diving spots, and wildlife that didn't get the memo about being afraid of humans. You can snorkel with whale sharks, explore underwater caves, and generally live like a retired marine biologist who gave up on academia and decided happiness mattered more than tenure. But it's not all tropical paradise postcards and Instagram-worthy sunsets. Supplies are shipped in sporadically, which means the grocery store is an adventure in what's available today. Forget brand loyalty. Forget specific ingredients. You're eating whatever arrived on the last boat. And if that means your lasagna now features mystery meat and optimism, so be it. The local Chinese food, however, is exceptional because the Chinese-Australian community here knows what they're doing, and they're not compromising on standards just because they live on a rock in the ocean. Employment is limited to government work, tourism, and roles at the detention centre, which, yes, Christmas Island has an immigration detention facility because Australia has a complicated relationship with its remote territories and uses them for purposes that are ethically questionable but logistically convenient. If you're looking for a job here, your options are narrow but stable. If you're looking to work remotely, good luck with that internet connection, which exists but thinks buffering is a personality trait. Housing costs are relatively affordable compared to mainland Australian cities. You're looking at around $400 to $700 a week for rent, depending on the place and how many crabs have decided to make your yard their personal highway. Buying property is trickier because available land is limited and governed by regulations that make sense only if you've spent several hours reading territorial law while drinking something strong enough to blur the legalese. The pace of life here is island time on steroids. Nothing happens quickly, nothing happens when you expect it to. The one bank might be closed because someone's cousin is getting married. The hardware store might be out of nails because the shipment got delayed and no one's stressed about it because stressing doesn't make boats move faster. If you're type A, Christmas Island will either cure you or give you a stress-induced rash. Probably both. But here's what you gain. Freedom from the noise. Freedom from the endless scroll, the constant hustle, the performance of productivity. You're living on an island where nature runs the show and humans are just guests trying not to step on crabs. You can hike through rainforest, dive into underwater caves, watch the ocean from cliffs, and never once worry about peak hour traffic or whether you replied to that email. Christmas Island isn't for everyone. It's isolated, it's weird, and the crabs are unavoidable. But if your idea of freedom involves waking up to jungle sounds, spending your afternoons in the ocean, and measuring success by how many crabs you successfully avoided on your drive home, you might have just found your place. Number 3. Norfolk Island, the pine tree paradise with autonomy issues and jaw-dropping views. At number 3, we've got Norfolk Island, the Australian external territory that feels more like an independent nation having an identity crisis. It's a tiny island in the Pacific Ocean between Australia, New Zealand, and New Caledonia, which means it's not particularly close to anything except confusion and beauty. It's technically Australian, but the locals will remind you, gently but firmly, that they've got their own culture, their own language, and their own way of doing things. And if you come here expecting mainland Australian norms, you're going to be politely but thoroughly corrected. Norfolk Island is small, just 35 square kilometres, but it's packed with history, stunning landscapes, and a population of around 1,700 people who are fiercely proud of their heritage. Many are descendants of the Bounty mutineers who settled here in the 1800s, and they speak a language called Norfolk, which is a blend of English and Tahitian that sounds like someone's having a lovely conversation, but you're only catching every third word. The island is gorgeous. Rolling green hills, dramatic cliffs, Norfolk pines that look like they were designed by someone trying to win a most photogenic tree competition, and beaches that are beautiful but also slightly terrifying because the surf here doesn't mess around. This is not a float gently on a pool noodle kind of ocean. This is a respect the power of nature or get absolutely dumped kind of ocean. Living on Norfolk Island feels like stepping back in time, but in a good way. There are no traffic lights. There's barely any traffic. People leave their cars unlocked, their doors open, and trust that their neighbors aren't going to rob them because everyone knows everyone. And social shame is a more effective deterrent than any security system. It's the kind of place where you wave at every car you pass because there are only about 12 of them and you probably know the drivers. The cost of living is a mixed bag. Some things are cheaper because there's no GST, goods and services tax, which was one of the big selling points until the Australian government decided to complicate things by imposing mainland tax laws on the island in recent years. Much to the frustration of locals who preferred their tax autonomy. Thank you very much. Groceries are expensive because everything's imported, but housing is surprisingly affordable compared to mainland cities. You can rent a decent place for around $300 to $500 a week. And if you're buying, properties range from affordable to, why is this house cheaper than a car? Because supply, demand, and isolation create weird market conditions. Employment is limited to tourism, agriculture, government work, and whatever entrepreneurial hustle you can muster. There's no major industry here. No factories, no corporate headquarters, no opportunities to climb a ladder that doesn't exist. If you need a job with a clear career trajectory and performance bonuses, Norfolk Island will disappoint you. If you want to run a small guest house, grow vegetables, or make artisan soap and sell it to tourists, you'll fit right in. The community here is tight-knit, which is wonderful until it's not. Everyone knows your business. Everyone knows when you're having a rough day. Everyone knows when you've had too many drinks at the RSL and started singing poorly. It's intimate, supportive, and occasionally suffocating, depending on your tolerance for communal life. But it's also the kind of place where people genuinely care, help each other, and show up when things get tough, which is increasingly rare in a world where most people don't know their neighbors' names. Internet exists, but it's not going to win any speed awards. Streaming is possible, but optimistic. Video calls require patience and a willingness to freeze mid-sentence while your co-worker stares at a pixelated version of your face. If your work requires reliable high-speed internet, Norfolk Island will test your commitment to the lifestyle versus your commitment to bandwidth. Weather is mild and pleasant year-round. It doesn't get freezing, it doesn't get unbearably hot, and it rains enough to keep everything green, but not so much that you're living in a constant state of dampness and regret. It's basically perfect if you hate extremes and just want pleasant temperatures that allow you to wear the same clothes year-round. But here's the thing about Norfolk Island. It's not just remote, it's psychologically remote. You're not popping over to the mainland for a weekend. Flights are expensive and infrequent. You're committing to island life, and that means accepting that you're far from everything. Family events, concerts, that one specific type of cheese you love. You're trading access for peace, convenience for space, and constant connectivity for actual presence. Subscribe to show that these videos actually help and make sense. Norfolk Island is for people who value autonomy, natural beauty, and a slower pace over convenience and variety. It's for people who want to know their neighbors, live without constant noise, and measure their day by sunsets instead of deadlines. It's not for everyone. But if you've been searching for a place where life feels manageable, human, and real, Norfolk Island might just be the pine-covered paradise you didn't know you needed. Number 2, Torres Strait Islands, Australia's tropical secret, with culture, isolation, and zero tourist crowds. At number 2, we've got the Torres Strait Islands, and if you've never heard of them, you're not alone. Most Australians couldn't point to them on a map if you gave them a compass, a GPS, and a helpful dolphin. These islands sit in the Torres Strait between the northern tip of Queensland and Papua New Guinea, which means they're technically Australian, but culturally distinct, geographically isolated, and gloriously free from the endless stream of tourists clogging up every other beautiful place in the country. There are over 270 islands in the Torres Strait, but only 17 are inhabited. The total population is around 4,500 people, most of whom are Torres Strait Islanders, Indigenous Australians with their own languages, customs, and traditions that predate colonisation by thousands of years. This isn't a place you move to casually. This is a place you move to with respect, understanding, and a genuine willingness to integrate into a culture that doesn't revolve around you. The islands are stunning. White sand beaches, clear blue water, coral reefs, and a pace of life so slow it makes sloths look hyperactive. The climate is tropical, hot, humid, and prone to monsoons that turn the sky dramatic and the ocean moody. If you like your weather predictable and mild, the Torres Strait will challenge that preference aggressively. But if you like the raw power of nature and don't mind sweating through your shirt by 9 in the morning, you'll adapt. Living here is not easy. Let's be brutally honest about that. Infrastructure is basic. Supplies are limited. Everything costs more because it has to be flown or shipped in, and logistics in remote Australia are expensive and complicated. Internet is slow when it works, which is not always. Mobile phone reception is patchy at best. If you're expecting mainland conveniences, you'll be disappointed within 24 hours. But what you get in return is something rare. Genuine community, deep cultural connection, and a lifestyle where people still fish for their dinner, gather together for storytelling, and prioritize relationships over productivity. The Torres Strait Islanders are some of the most welcoming people you'll meet, but they also expect respect. You don't come here to find yourself on someone else's ancestral land. You come here to contribute, to learn, and to live quietly without imposing your expectations on a culture that was thriving long before you showed up with your existential crisis and a suitcase full of quinoa. Employment opportunities are limited to teaching, healthcare, government services, and roles within the local communities. There are fishing industries, pearl farming, and small-scale tourism ventures. But this is not a place you move to for career advancement. This is a place you move to for a completely different definition of success, one measured in relationships, experiences, and the absence of peak hour traffic. Housing is available, but often through government or community programs. Private rental markets are almost non-existent, and buying property as an outsider is complicated by land ownership laws that protect Indigenous land rights. This isn't a place where you casually buy a beachfront property and retire. If you want to live here long-term, you'll need to establish genuine ties to the community, contribute meaningfully, and earn your place. The Torres Strait Islands are not for tourists. They're not for digital nomads looking for the next Instagram backdrop. They're for people who understand that freedom sometimes means giving up comfort, that peace sometimes requires isolation, and that the best communities are the ones where everyone knows your name and holds you accountable. Number 1, Arnhem Land and remote Northern Territory, the final frontier where Australia forgot civilization exists. And here we are, at number 1, Arnhem Land and the remote parts of the Northern Territory, the final frontier of Australian freedom, where the government barely remembers you exist. The land is ancient and sacred, and your closest neighbour might be 30 kilometres away, wrestling a crocodile or having a perfectly pleasant afternoon. It's hard to tell from a distance. Arnhem Land is a vast region in the northeastern corner of the Northern Territory, covering roughly 97,000 square kilometres of some of the most untouched, rugged, and culturally significant land in Australia. It's Aboriginal land, owned and managed by Indigenous communities, and if you want to visit, let alone live there, you need a permit. This isn't public land where you can just rock up with a swag and a dream. This is protected land with thousands of years of history, and the traditional owners take that seriously, as they should. But beyond Arnhem Land, the broader remote Northern Territory offers pockets of forgotten towns, cattle stations, and off-grid communities where living free isn't a lifestyle choice. It's the only option. Places like Timber Creek, Borroloola, Daly Waters, and countless unnamed spots along dirt roads that don't appear on Google Maps. These are places where services are minimal, infrastructure is questionable, and your biggest concern is whether the road's passable after the wet season, not whether your Wi-Fi is fast enough to stream Netflix. Living in remote NT is not for the faint-hearted. It's hot, brutally, soul-crushingly hot. We're talking 40-degree plus days, where your car's steering wheel becomes a legitimate safety hazard, and stepping outside feels like walking into a hairdryer set to punishment. The wet season brings monsoons, flooding, humidity so thick you could chew it, and the very real possibility of being cut off from civilization for weeks if the roads wash out. But if you can handle the heat, the isolation, and the fact that going to the shops might involve a 200-kilometer round trip, the freedom here is unmatched. You can buy land dirt cheap, sometimes literally just dirt, and build whatever you want, however you want, with minimal council oversight, because there often isn't a council. You want to live off-grid with solar panels, rainwater tanks, and a deep sense of self-reliance? This is your place. You want to avoid every single bureaucratic regulation that makes life on the coast feel like living in a legal minefield? Welcome home. The remote NT attracts a specific type of person: cattle station workers, mining contractors, indigenous communities, grey nomads who never left, and people running from something. Debt, ex-partners, the crushing weight of suburban expectations. It's not polite to ask too many questions. People reinvent themselves here. And as long as you're not causing trouble, no one cares who you were before you arrived. Employment is limited but available. Cattle stations always need workers. Mining operations offer fly-in fly-out jobs with serious pay. Indigenous communities employ teachers, nurses, and support workers. And if you're entrepreneurial, you can start businesses catering to the sparse but steady flow of adventurous travelers passing through. Just don't expect rapid growth or venture capital interest. You're building something small, sustainable, and entirely your own. Housing costs are laughably cheap compared to Australian cities. You can rent a house for $200 a week or buy land for the price of a used car. Of course, that land might come with red dust, no water, and the occasional deadly snake, but that's freedom, mate. You're not paying for a harbour view, you're paying for space. Endless, open, untouched space where your nearest neighbour might wave from a distance, but won't judge your life choices or complain about your dogs. The remote NT is where Australia's frontier spirit still exists. It's tough, unforgiving, and absolutely indifferent to your comfort. But it's also honest. There's no pretense here. No keeping up appearances, no pressure to perform. You work, you live, you survive. And if you're smart and adaptable, you thrive in a way that cities will never understand. This is freedom measured not in wealth or status, but in autonomy, space, and the ability to live entirely on your own terms. And before you pack your existential crisis into a duffel bag and disappear into the Australian wilderness with nothing but a roadmap from 1997 and a misguided sense of adventure, let's get real for a moment. Living in these forgotten territories isn't just about escaping. It's about choosing a fundamentally different life. You're trading convenience for autonomy, connectivity for silence, and the illusion of security for genuine self-reliance. These places don't have 24-hour Woolworths, instant delivery, or mechanics who can fix your car before lunch. What they do have is space, endless, uninterrupted space, where you can breathe without inhaling someone else's exhaust fumes or opinions. The people who thrive in these remote corners aren't running away from responsibility. They're running toward a version of life that makes sense to them. They're the cattle station workers who'd rather spend 12-hour days under the sun than 12-hour days under fluorescent office lights. They're the families who homeschool their kids because the nearest school is 300 kilometers away, and they've decided that teaching their children about stars, land, and resilience matters more than standardized test scores. They're the retirees who finally realized that owning a 4-bedroom house in suburban Brisbane wasn't freedom. It was just expensive captivity with better weather than Melbourne. But let's not romanticize it into oblivion. Remote living is hard. Genuinely, physically, mentally hard. Your water comes from tanks you maintain yourself. Your power comes from solar panels you installed, troubleshot, and occasionally cursed at when clouds decide to ruin your week. Your groceries come from wherever's closest. And closest is a relative term when you're measuring distance in hours, not minutes. You will get lonely. You will question your choices. You will have moments where you trade your entire off-grid setup for a decent coffee and a conversation with someone who isn't a lizard. Australia's forgotten territories aren't solutions to your problems. They're opportunities to redefine what problems are worth having. Would you rather stress about mortgage repayments on a house you barely see, or stress about whether the creek will flood and cut off your road for a week? Would you rather deal with passive-aggressive emails from co-workers you tolerate, or deal with equipment breakdowns you fix yourself with duct tape and determination? Neither is objectively better, but one might feel a hell of a lot more honest. So if you're genuinely considering this, really considering it, not just fantasizing after a bad day at work, start small. Visit these places. Talk to the people who live there. Ask the uncomfortable questions about water, power, medical emergencies, and what happens when things go wrong, because they will go wrong. Understand that moving to remote Australia isn't an escape, it's an exchange. You're giving up ease for freedom, comfort for space, and constant distraction for the terrifying, beautiful experience of being genuinely present in your own life. And if that trade sounds worth it, if that possibility makes your heart beat a little faster and your soul a little lighter, then maybe, just maybe, one of these forgotten territories is exactly where you belong. Just bring decent boots, a sense of humor, and the willingness to learn that freedom isn't free. It's earned, one dusty, sweaty, glorious day at a time.